This legislation applies to future presidents. If a president suffers a crippling physical or mental problem, the 25th Amendment creates a path to discharge the powers and duties of his office. 25th Amendment gives Congress the power to establish how this transfer of power would take place, with a strong role for the vice president in what would happen. Why now? Because this is part of our agenda.
Good Sunday afternoon from our nation's capital here in Washington, D.C. And this being our Sunday show, we go into our comment sections within each of the videos or from our Twitter feed and we find a question and we answer that question. So here's today's question. How long do you think Biden will be in office before he gets kicked out or dies so Kamala can come in? Maybe 9, 12 months at the most? This is not the first time that I've heard this comment. I've actually heard it from my own family. So where does this actually stem from? Well, let's talk about conspiracy theories and evidence. Belief in conspiracy theories is generally based not on evidence, but on the faith of the believer. When creating a theory to influence an audience, you want to play in the realm of truths, not facts, and possibilities, not probabilities. These theories typically justify themselves based on gaps or ambiguity in knowledge, and they argue that the truth is the explanation of what is going on. They use circular reasoning, and that's a logical fallacy in which the reasoner begins with what they're trying to end with. So let's analyze this one. But, to do that, we're going to have to start all the way back in 2016. Yeah, in January 2016, Jacob Wohl, who is considered to be an internet political troll, argued on his now banned Twitter account that Kamala Harris is not eligible to be president. His logic goes because neither of her parents were legal residents of the United States for at least 10 years, which he argued is a requirement for nationalization. Well, of course, we know that's not true, but it's an argument that he made and it gained ground. So let's skip ahead till about August 17th of 2020, when an opinion piece was in Newsweek was entitled "Some Questions for Kamala Harris About Eligibility." And this was written by an attorney, and he's also a professor, John Eastman. And his intent was to actually explore a minority legal argument about the definition of who is a natural-born citizen in the United States, and not necessarily about her eligibility. But the very next day, the Trump campaign stated that she was not eligible to serve as president because her mother is from India and her father is from Jamaica. Remember, Kamala Harris was born in Oakland, California on October 20th of 1964, and no one has argued her birth certificate. However, that evening, President Trump said during a White House briefing, "I heard it today that she doesn't meet the requirements. And by the way, the lawyer who wrote the piece is very highly qualified, very talented lawyer. I have no idea if it's right, but that's what I heard." Now, this isn't inconsistent with President Trump's birther allegations he made on President Obama and Senator Ted Cruz in 2005. I don't think it was racist. I don't think it's a matter of sex or color or where the person's from. He's going to find a way to say that they're unfit or ineligible for office. It may appeal more to his base based on her sex or color. However, to President Trump, it's just a gall to challenge him. Shortly thereafter, another false conclusion started quickly developing online, and it stated that if Biden is unable to serve as full-time president, his full term as president, then Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi would be next in line to become the president. That's because the vice president's not eligible to be president. It gets crazy. But that's a whole different conspiracy theory. However, it will come to play later in our discussion. So now let's skip forward to October. On October 8th, Trump was on Fox Business News. Let's listen to what he had to say.
"I don't think you could get worse, and totally unlikable." And she is. She's a communist. She's left of Bernie. She's rated left of Bernie by everybody. She's a communist. We're going to have a communist, and she's going to be, in my opinion, within a month. Look, I stood next to Joe, and I looked at Joe. Joe's not lasting 2 months as president. Okay, that's my opinion.
So Trump's communist comments, they play directly to his base. This is exactly why we do not want Kamala Harris anywhere in the line of succession to the presidency. Well, at least that would be their argument. Now, later on the 9th, Nancy Pelosi did actually have a committee plan or a committee meeting, which she presented a plan. And what her plan was is she introduced a plan to create a bipartisan 16-member commission that could determine whether or not an ailing president was fit for office. There'd be 4 members that would be chosen by the Republican leaders and 4 from the Democratic leaders. And they're from medical personnel, physicians, and other medical authorities. The other 8 would include high-ranking cabinet executives. It would also include former presidents, possibly surgeon generals, or other cabinet members. Pelosi felt that she was compelled to take this step because President Trump just had a bout with coronavirus in the beginning of October. He was hospitalized for 3 days. While her proposal did not affect Trump directly, she said it applies to future presidents, but we are reminded by the necessity of action by the health of our current president. Well, as you can imagine that day, President Trump immediately went to Rush Limbaugh and was on the show. So he told the conservative radio talk show host, "Joe's in no condition to be a candidate. We can say it nicely or we can say it badly. The 25th Amendment that crazy Nancy is, she's crazy. She's a nut job. But this 25th Amendment, I think it is so they can get Kamala in to replace Joe." And then more fuel for the fire. "If Biden becomes president and cannot complete his term, Harris will become president and Pelosi will be the vice president." So then on October 13th, former White House physician Ronnie Jackson said he is convinced that Biden does not have the cognitive ability to be commander-in-chief. Again, all this is not inconsistent with President Trump's attacking of presidential candidates, just like he attacked presidential candidate Hillary Clinton for her medical possible conditions. Again, like I said, I don't think this is sexism. He finds a way to attack those running against him, especially the ones that he's concerned about. That brings us to October 14th. This is when the Trump campaign decided to create and disseminate truly a disinformation video. And it talks about Pelosi's plan, remove Biden if elected and install Kamala. So Pelosi is showing in the video saying the 25th Amendment creates a path preserving stability if the president becomes suffering a crippling physical or mental problem. And then at the very end of this, she shows a picture of a very confused look Biden. Later in the video, she asks, "Why now?" "Because this is part of our agenda, period." Well, and then viewers are warned, don't vote for President Kamala. You know, that period, shouldn't really have been there because the full Pelosi quote is, "Why now? Because this is part of our agenda for the people." And she went on to talk about the Democratic initiatives on health care, infrastructure, and other issues. So what was the path of disinformation that we've seen? Well, in just 3 months, we went from Harris not being eligible to be vice president. We went from Biden is not medically fit to a Harris-Pelosi plan to get rid of Biden and have President Harris and a Vice President Pelosi. Well, it also included Biden knowing about the plan because Biden was going to step down on his own. So not like he's going to be removed, but that's beside the point. So how does this fit our model? Well, the end state is that Harris is president and Pelosi is vice president, and we've got to get there someplace. And we have gaps in knowledge. Well, at least the followers of the conspiracy would have gaps in knowledge, and some of the supporters would. And those would be like, for instance, if Kamala Harris' parents were not from the United States, can she still be president? Well, we have an answer to that, but that's a gap in knowledge. Can the Congress remove the president by a committee in the 25th Amendment? Well, it's interesting that in the last couple of days, we've actually been talking a lot about that. If the president is removed or dies, does the vice president become president and the speaker vice president? No, that's not how the line of succession works. However, that is a belief that some people have. So what's my conclusion in all this? Well, besides this being a conspiracy theory, the number of people involved would have to be numerous. I mean, you're talking about the vice president, the president, Speaker of the House, the DNC, and as Benjamin Franklin once said, the only way to keep a secret between two people is for one of them to be dead. So the amount of coordination is pretty large. As we've talked in the past, I'm a firm believer in the Lichtman keys to the White House. They favor re-election to the incumbent's party. If this was a plan between the DNC, Biden, Harris, and Pelosi, wouldn't just making Harris the presidential candidate and Pelosi the vice president candidate a much easier way to go? Especially during the pandemic. It's not like we went through a full-blown debates and we had states that did vote, or voting was, this would have been a perfect time for the DNC just say, yep, here's our candidate, and then they say this is our candidate and go with it. However, this election was for President Trump to win or lose. It was in his hands. He had possession of the keys the entire time. And it's because he did not keep the keys is why he lost. The Democrats were just in for a ride. So whoever they pushed forward back in June was going to be who won the election. Now it's President-elect Biden with Vice President Harris. And it's not President-elect Harris with Vice President Pelosi. Thank you very much for the comments and the questions. As always, put comments down below and we might talk about those next Sunday. Or you can send us at our Twitter account and we'll definitely look at those too.